joining yarn using acrylic. On my blanket, the Kidnapper, I'm using a 100% acrylic yarn. And to join that, there's two suggestions for you. Because it's a blanket, I don't actually like to join at the edge, because I like my edge to be neat and I don't want the knots or the obvious joins of yarn to happen there. So I like it to happen midstream. I don't like my joins to happen in the middle of a motif. So I just monitor where I'm at and just ensure that the join is going to happen outside of a motif, above, below, or on either side of it. So I just keep that in mind. In this case, I'm using a ridged rib stitch on outside of the motif. So I'm finished my motif and I'm going along and I'm realizing I'm getting to the end of my yarn. So there's two ways. Method number one, I don't know what it's called, but I just work the two yarns side by side. So I'm going to cut off a bit here. Let's just say I'm going to work it till about that far, and then I bring the new yarn in. Okay, so I've got my new yarn, so I'm going to turn it over, just checking where I am on my pattern. Okay, so I'm just knitting on the back side. So I will start this by just knitting in my pattern, which is purling, not purling, knitting on the back side. So I will get away from the edge before I start what the plan is. Getting away from the edge. I like to get away from the edge quite a bit, actually. Okay, about that much. Then what I do is I work the two yarns together. So I leave a little bit of length on that side, and now I work these two yarns together. So there's the new yarn, the end of the new yarn, and now I'm just going to knit the old and the new together. So I like to do that for, as many as I allowed for there, about 10 stitches, or as many as I'm going to get. Maybe I cut that yarn a bit too quickly, but I'll just knit it till it's mostly used up. So getting to the end, I don't know how many that was. I'll do one more. Okay, and it is now, I like to bring it to the wrong side, sort of at its end. Okay, so I will just continue in pattern, and now what I'll do is I will just knit a couple rows and come back and show you what this looks like. Okay, I'm just knitting back across, and there's where the end of my old yarn was, and this was the beginning of my new. So I'll just show you what I do. I'll just knit. Okay, so I'm just knitting in my pattern, and there's where my old yarn ended, and I don't worry about that guy. I just leave him alone. And now you see the doubles, because the two yarns were together, and I just knit them as though they were one single stitch, and I just knit that as if it was a single stitch. That's the old and the new together, and you just follow whatever pattern you're following. In this case, this is the ridged rib stitch, and I'm just pretending that old and the new yarn together are actually one loop instead of two. And now I'm at the point where there was my new yarn, the end of my new yarn. It doesn't matter if it's on the right side or the wrong side, it really doesn't, but eventually I shift everything over to the wrong side, although on a blanket there's no right or wrong. But anyway, so there's the ending of that, and then what I sometimes do is I take that, just that beginning piece, and I knit it a couple more with it, not many, because I like to stay away from the edge. I'll just pick it up for maybe 2 stitches, and then I drop it. Okay, because I don't want it to be near the edge. And then I continue. Perfect. Okay, so what I'll do is I will knit a couple more rows to show you what I do with these ends. I've knit a couple more rows, and there's my old ends, and all I do is, seriously? Yep, that is all I do. I just snip them off, and that's it. And tell me where did it join? You can't see. It's a teeny bit bulkier in here. Nobody will notice. That's method 1. Method 2 for joining acrylic is the Russian join, and I will just attach right next to this a video I did some time ago on how to do the Russian join when I was making a scarf for my nephew. So that will show you how to do the Russian join. Joining yarn. When I'm knitting something like a scarf, I really don't want to have anything other than my original cast on tail and my cast off tail to weave in. And if your scarf is small enough and tiny, like this little miniature one, it's okay, you'll only use one ball of yarn, but more than likely you'll have to join yarn. And instead of having to join yarn so that you're having to weave the ends in or join in the middle of your work, what I like to do is actually join the yarn together before you knit it in, and that way it just blends into the project. I'm going to demonstrate 2 different methods of joining yarn. The first one is if you're working with an acrylic. This is an acrylic. So to join the yarn together, you should probably do what is called a Russian join. Not probably, you will need to do what is called a Russian join. Not my favorite method, but there really is no choice with acrylic. When you're working with natural fibers, there's a wonderful splicing felting method. Some people call it the spit splice or the felting splice, which I will show you in a second part of this video. So for this one, I'm using a threader to thread. This is your existing working yarn that ties into your scarf, and I'm threading not a tapestry needle, but a rather fine pointed needle, which means it's going to have a small eye, which means I need the assistance of a threader to get the yarn through the needle, like that. So now what you do is you just slightly untwist your yarn, get your needle in there, and you are going to sew up the middle of the thread of the yarn. Just try to keep your yarn in the middle of all those fibers. The more length you have, the better, the stronger the join is. So I would like the length of at least the needle, and then pull it through. You have a loop on the end. I don't want you to lose that loop. You need that loop to join the other yarn into, so be wary of that. Just watch what you're doing. Pull that needle through. Be aware of that loop right there. See the loop? You don't want to lose that. And you just want to pull your other yarn through. As a matter of fact, I think I'll grab a needle just to save the end of that loop, and I am going to pull this yarn through like that, pull the thread through, there we go. So it's been sewn onto itself like that. So that is the end of the yarn that is attached to your scarf. And I do have a little loop in here. There it is. There's the little loop. I don't want to lose it. There it is. There's the loop. Okay, so now we have to attach the new yarn because you're at the end of your yarn. So here's the end of another ball. Well, it isn't really, it's just a little strand, but it's for demonstration purposes. So you have to do the same thing. You will thread your needle with the end of your new yarn, and I need to use a little threader, and I will pull it through ever so gently if it lets me. There it goes. Okay, so you are going to do the same thing in threading the needle through the yarn, but first you have to join it to the other one. So you find that loop that you had, you thread the needle through the loop. There we go, the yarn's been threaded through it. Ta-da! Okay, like that. I'm just going to turn this the other way. And now there's the yarn through the loop. Now you are going to take your needle and just stitch or poke it into the plies of the new working yarn up through the middle of it the best you can. Keep it in the middle, and the more distance you can keep that needle inside the yarn, the stronger the connection will be. So when you feel you have a decent amount captured, poke the needle out and pull it through like you did last time. Get the end through. There you go. Take your needle off, and now you want to tighten up the connection. So you want to pull on this, pull on both sides, tighten up the join, tighten it up. And now we want to get rid of these little extra tails. So I just take my scissors and I snip it, and take my scissors and snip the other end like that, and just tug again. There's, well, that one looks okay. This one's poking out a little bit. I'll just snip that shorter. And there you have it. Then when you knit this in, you won't even notice that connection in your project, and then you don't have to worry about weaving in even more ends. And that is the Russian join.